Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Alec Harris. I am president of GIA Publications. It's my incredible honor to welcome you all to this webinar. We have three amazing authors of the new resource we published called Teaching Music Through Contemporary A Cappella, part of our Teaching Music Through Performance series. We have them now for band, orchestra, choir, jazz, and now contemporary a cappella. Really thrilled to have this newest addition into the series. We have the three main authors with us, Deke Sharon, Frizzell, and Marc Silverberg. And just a quick bio for all three of them. Deke is, of course, heralded as the founder of contemporary a cappella. He produced the Sing Off on NBC and has served as an arranger, on-site music director, and vocal producer for Universal's Pitch Perfect 1, 2, and 3, starring Anna Kendrick and Rebel Wilson. J.D. Frizzell is composer, conductor, and baritone, and he serves as director of fine arts and director of vocal music at Briarcrest Christian School in Memphis, Tennessee. And Marc Silverberg teaches contemporary voice at the American Musical and Dramatic Academy in New York City. Just a couple little ground rules. If you have any questions, we're going to try to reserve about the last 15 minutes of this webinar for your questions. So if you have them, put them into the Q&A panel and we'll go ahead and get to them towards the end of the session. And then also we have a coupon code for 15% off of their book on the giamusic.com website, which is the coupon code is acapella15. So I'll put information about that into the chat. And then I will get out of the way and I will turn things over to Marc to start things out. So thank you all for being here.
Oh, goody. I hate being last because it's like, Deke is the father of a cappella, and JD has done all this amazing stuff in one voice, and here's Marc, and some guy. So I always go last, and it's like, yeah, I teach.
Marc,
anyway.
no, last but certainly not least. And Marc is first of all known as the kind of like the pan-talented humorist of the a cappella community, and he has all kinds of like T-shirts and little animated comic strips he's put together, as well as being one of our few PhDs. So he's got the talent and he's also got the sense of humor. So ladies and gentlemen, round of applause.
Yeah, no, I was not fishing for that, but thank you. Yeah, I'll just talk. I was actually the one who pitched this idea to Deke and JD. I've always been a fan of the Teaching Music Through Performance series. Obviously, I'm a choir guy, so I have all the choir books. I had the middle school choir book, but I noticed there was nothing for contemporary a cappella. There was nothing for vocal jazz. There was nothing for barbershop. All of these great emerging vocal genres that were completely unrepresented. And so that's what I pitched to Deke and JD. And 2 years later, maybe, I don't remember, we got our first volume out. It took us actually a while to even come up with a list of songs. I remember, Deke, I remember I sent you this giant list and you're like, no. It's shrink this down.
Yeah, so it was a difficult discussion and a difficult situation because nothing like this has ever been done before. Right. And for those of you who are playing along at home, hello everybody. It was tough because we wanted this to both be current, modern, and useful, but also at the same time really reflect the scope of what has been and still is in publication. So it was like, well, we need to get a song by this arranger, and how do you not have a song by a cappella? And so it became one of those giant logic puzzles where it's like, if Jim's wearing a purple shirt and Sally jumps rope on Tuesday, what is Fred eating for lunch? You know, those kind of things. So we had to be like, okay, well, we'll take this out of here and we'll use this arrangement by this person, which covers that box and whatever, because we really wanted to cover not just the most current contemporary a cappella and the songs that people know and love from pentatonics or whatever, but going back in time and hitting the classic doo-wop songs and making sure that we had representation from the biggest and best known a cappella groups from the past 40 or 50 years. And then there's also the challenge of like, is the song published is it going to remain in publication for long enough that this book won't all of a sudden be just an enormous headache to educators if they pick it up 8 years from now? So there were a lot of different balls that were in the air. And I don't even remember having said that to that first list. I just remember thinking, we have to do everything under the sun and make this the one, like, volume 1 wants to be your like flag in the moon, right? Where's that song by the Nylons? Everybody saying for the longest time, we need a version of that, like this kind of stuff, so that when people pick up this book and they're like, okay, they look at the list and like, yeah, that's it. That's definitive. These are the biggest a cappella songs and published a cappella sheet music, or the vast majority of them from the past few decades.
I remember when we were talking about the first list, I remember you getting very angry because it was like, let's get rockapella in there and let's get the Nylons in there. And you were the only one who had those arrangements. And that's why you did them, because they didn't exist.
Right.
Like,
but I got mad because I was like, this can't be the me story and this can't be the me book. I started a publishing company in the middle of the 90s because there was no published contemporary a cappella stuff. And I taught myself how to arrange back in the middle of the 80s in my barbershop quartet, because I wanted to sing the kind of music that was on the radio. And then with the Tufts Beelzebub, started adding vocal percussion things because I wanted to do Led Zeppelin and the kind of music, Pink Floyd, that you couldn't do with the traditional shooby-doo-wop. So yeah, it made sense. And a lot of those classic songs were published in some form, but not a cappella. And that's obviously, it's in the title. It's got to be a cappella.
Right. And I think one of the hooks for this was, as I was talking to JD, you're a big proponent of published legal arrangements, JD. You kind of led the charge on that front. And that was another reason I thought this book was a good idea, was to show people, yes, there are published legal stuff.
And so much more now than even there was 2 or 3 years ago. I remember sitting down with Deke at Deke was at an ACDA. It was something, and we were like, there was a lot of pressure around copyrights and all these quote illegal arrangements, and pressure to push a cappella towards like what show choir and marching band was having to do, and paying like $500 every time you want to arrange a song, which of course would be or more, which would be completely impossible for most groups. And I remember we just like drew a line in the sand. We were like, okay, we're going to agree right now that whatever influence that we have, we're going to keep that from happening. And we did. And I mean, it took us talking to everyone we knew, all the arrangers. We all like got together and we said, okay, we've got to hold out here. We can't let this fall in this direction, because it will be detrimental to the art form of contemporary a cappella, because there's going to be new music all the time, and you've got all these scholastic groups that don't have any money, and if they can't just arrange a song for their group, we're in big trouble. Luckily, if you're not aware yet, check out Note Flight Marketplace and Sheet Music Plus. Both of those have been purchased by Hal Leonard, and they have most of the print rights to popular music. There are over 1 million songs now on both of those platforms, and they add them all the time, and you can just legally arrange something and put it on there and even sell it and make some money, but also arrange it legally and have that permission. So that's a really good resource, and that was a game changer for having legal arrangement, because before that, when we were going through for this book, if that had not started happening, which thankfully it did, we would have way less contemporary pieces in this series that we just put out with GIA. So that's a good place that a lot of that will come, because it's a complicated framework with, I mean, every song you might think, oh, how hard can it be to like license, Firework by Katy Perry? And then you go through and there are 9 songwriters, and each songwriter has their own publishing company and like could be split in half, and so you've got like 18 companies that are involved in it. So anyways, it was really, really good to be able to get all of these in one place, and at least as Deke said, like plant the flag on the moon. Hopefully we can do more series in the future, because there's so much incredible arranging that's being done in the last 10 years that we really just couldn't get to, because we wanted to make sure that we got those like tentpole songs.
Truly great. And also one thing, it's really interesting, because if we were talking about this 5 years ago, before Sheet Music Plus publishing really took off, and by the way, it's all being kind of moved over to the Arrange Me portal So all one word, arrange me. And that's where anybody who's an arranger, if you're out there or if you have friends or whatever, it's a fantastic resource. And now there are millions and millions of songs. If people have done arrangements, you upload them up there and they're completely legal. And arrangers get paid 10% and it's all above board. And now anybody can sing anything. But what's interesting is it's really changed the value of a book like this. Before it was like, where do I find any music that'll work a cappella? And now you'll go on Sheet Music Plus and you'll search for an a cappella arrangement of Africa and there might be 37 of them. So you're like, where's one that I know is going to be good? And we intentionally chose arrangers for this that are obviously tried and true. The tuning's going to lock. There were good choices made in the voicings and the sonority and the background parts, et cetera, which is important. But also we made sure that we didn't put like incredibly challenging stuff in this. This is really meant for educators so that you can go and be like, okay, this is a great rock solid version of this song that everybody wants to sing. And we know it's going to succeed.
Right. Yeah, there are a lot of different publishing companies represented here, a lot of different places where you can get music. I was going to say even there's a couple from musicnotes.com that were in there as well. But we have Sheet Music Plus arrangements in the book. That's one thing that I really wanted to make sure that we showcased. All right, let's get to some of the meat and potatoes. So you guys co-wrote a chapter on emotional singing. I think the chapter exactly is, let's see, emotional expression in group singing. Can you guys talk about how you draw out those emotions with your singers?
JD,
I'll let you. Okay, so this is a thing that Deke and I could literally talk for years about. It's like we like share an arm on this topic, but
absolutely.
Sorry, it's a loaded question. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So again, I there's so many ways that you can get started with emotional connection. I think that chapter is really valuable in this book, where we talk about some just really practical steps that you can take. But here, like some really simple ones, right? With any average a cappella group, and by average I don't mean like they're not any good, but just like a typical a cappella group. Everybody's busy. Everybody has a lot going on in their life, and so sometimes just sitting down, changing the scene, going someplace different than your normal rehearsal environment, someplace quiet, someplace serene, someplace safe, and someplace where people feel comfortable sharing. You can then like read the lyrics. That's a really easy place to start. The words can tell us so much about what the emotional intent is of a song. But beyond like talking about the lyrics, and then a lot of times I will ask my singers, like, what do we want to make the audience feel? Because that's a hard thing to do. And we all have to agree what that feeling is. And then we have to figure out how do we get to the point where we are effective enough to get them to feel that way, right? Those performances that we remember in our lives that stick out to us. I know every single person in this webinar can think of those pretty quickly. And I'm sure there was technical prowess in the performance. I'm sure there was like great musicianship and tuning and whatever else. But I promise you the thing that you remember is the way that it made you feel. And so that's what we're always striving for. But we can't forget that, and this is where like I really get on my high horse. It's hard for audiences to become emotional through lack of confidence from the performers, through lack of technical prowess. And so for me, a lot of the work that I do with scholastic a cappella groups, high school, middle school, college, is helping them identifying what those technical barriers are within their own group when they're approaching their pieces, and then how to remove those barriers so that then all the singers feel confident and they can sing, in an honest and in an open way that's free of fear and full of emotion. And if we're thinking about like, oh, I'm not sure what my note is on that one weird part in the bridge, or I'm really uncomfortable on that tessitura switch, in that part because it's written a little too high for me, or whatever, all those tiny little things, they're just like little drops of water that slowly erode the confidence of a performer and then of the group collectively. And so I encourage you as a director to try to identify what are those things that your group is thinking about instead of the thing that they want the audience to feel, instead of genuinely sharing their heart and their soul, because they can't do that if they're thinking about those technical things that are sort of holding them back. So that's my start. Deke has a lot of great stuff that he and I have talked about too. Deke, what else am I?
Yeah, well, if you're going to buy only one book, buy this book. But of course, this whole topic is so close to my heart. I wrote a whole other book about it called The Heart of Vocal Harmony. The bottom line is, and JD does this a lot as well, I've worked with so many different groups around the world, and the number one thing that it always comes back to is emotion. The reason an audience is out there in those seats is because they want to feel something. And with a cappella in particular, with no instruments to hide behind, with nothing else going on stage but the people, their countenance and their emotions are the driving force behind what's going on. And like JD said, I mean, he just gave you a small piece of a chapter about the incredibly detrimental results of having fear and fear-based singing, which may work for a choir that's got a commanding director and he's shouting at everybody and everyone just needs to sing, Beethoven's Ninth. But if they're not feeling joy, even if the orchestra's swelling, it's not, you've got to see it on their faces. And here are some real important takeaways. Your audience will be more engaged and come back to concerts more often, but you're going to find the technical aspects of your group's performance are actually better. Their valves are going to lock more, their tuning is better. Like the actual physics of sound benefit from having a unified emotional conduit going on between and amongst your singers. So, if people are singing and walking on sunshine, but their corner of their mouths are down, turned a little bit, and the vowels are kind of reverting towards a schwa, you end up with this kind of like, not really walking on sunshine, I'm just kind of moseying, and it sends a very different message. So obviously there's a lot in this book other than that, but JD and I are both huge proponents of making sure that the emotional component to your singer's performance and the choices that you're making throughout the entire piece of music, all leading back to that thesis, be paramount.
Let's talk about a very specific set of choices. Ben Spalding actually wrote a chapter in here about competitions, where he sort of makes the argument that if you're competing because you want to win gold, you're probably not competing for the right reasons. What are your thoughts about joining, ICHSA, ICCA, all of those things? Yes, Deke.
Thanks, Mark. So I created that competition at the ICHSA back when it was just the NCCA, the National Championship of College Acapella. I wanted there to be a March Madness of acapella. And it was just a couple of years out of college, but I knew if we're going to really popularize college acapella, and then later the high school thing took off, and also the Contemporary Acapella Recording Awards. And then I was a music director and vocal producer for the Sing Off on NBC, and blah, 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 blah. So many of these major things that I've done, and then Pitch Perfect is based around this competition that I started, right? So many of these things are based around competitions, but here's the thing you need to know. The competition is to get the audience in the house, right? Americans are, in particular, are obsessed with like top 10 lists and who's the best and all this kind of stuff. It's literally an entire bait and switch, because you can't fundamentally, completely 100% precisely judge art, right? Who's better, Picasso or Monet? It's a ridiculous question. Who's better, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones? It's a taste. It's a matter of what you like and what you want. And there are technical aspects to music, right? But at the same time, go back and listen to a great Motown track, right? Compared to a pop song nowadays. The pop tunes today are completely tuned. Absolutely everything is snapped to the grid. Technically, it's perfect. Everything's aligned rhythmically, blah, blah, blah. The Motown tune has more heart, right? So you can't rely entirely upon the technical aspects of music to judge something. And in the end, it ends up becoming a judgment call. I tell this to groups backstage of the competitions all the time. I told it to every single group on the sing-off. I said, look around the room. The other groups here are not your competition. They're going to be your friends in the future. You're going to start groups with them and hang out. And we ended up having relationships and babies and marriages, I think in that order. But that's a different story. The more important thing to know is,
we'll talk later.
Yeah, we'll talk later. The more important thing to know is that if you go up on stage and you sing with your heart, there will be some people in the audience for whom you will be their favorite, right? So you'll make new fans. And if you do music right, you always win. So this idea that there's one winner and everybody else is lost is actually ridiculous in music. And I try to dissuade anyone who's backstage and only cares about winning from really focusing on that, because I think it ends up affecting the energy that you have on stage as well. Go out there, try to make the world a better place, connect with the other people that you're on stage with, have a good time, learn from what the judges say, become friends with all the other a cappella groups, enjoy the afterglow and after party and sing till the wee hours of the morning. And someone's going to end up getting the trophy, because that's the construct in which all of this happens. But bottom line, when you have a competition, more people go, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to draw an audience to a cappella. So yeah,
just a quick thing. I've judged many a competition, and backstage the tension is so palpable, and I'm thinking, why? You know, everyone's so guarded, and I hate the other person, but that's not what a competition is, you know?
No, and thankfully on the sing-off, where I really was able to pull all the groups aside and give them this big speech on day one, they all became the best of friends. And there were genuine tears when a group would leave because they were going to miss their friends. Like, everyone wanted everyone to win, which was a really, really great energy. I think that if you look at the overall college a cappella world, well, pre-COVID, hopefully afterwards, the numbers will remain pretty much the same, but there are about 3,000 college a cappella groups out there, and only about 300 did the competition, meaning there's really only 10% of the overall college a cappella world that was doing this competition. Most of them were just out there, like, you know, singing under the arch at lunch on Friday, and, you know, doing a jam at this fraternity or sorority house, and then having a big concert over here and performing at a different college. And that's the point, right? That's the whole thing that matters. So thankfully, even though there's a high profile percentage of the college a cappella world that was, you know, getting intense about all of this, most of them realized it's all ridiculous and fun. Let's sing and make friends and have a good time.
Yeah. JD, do you have anything to?
I'd like to speak also to the choices that you make about the music that you perform, because a lot of groups at a competition will try to choose whatever they think is going to win. And that leads to a lot of the same kind of sets at these competitions. In fact, one of the competitions I went to a few years ago, I remember looking around the room and thinking, oh gosh, this is really happening. People in the audience were only clapping for the group that they were there for. And I was like, oh my gosh, okay, this is not, this is not what we're about. No. But everybody was trying so hard to win the competition.
Yeah.
And here's where this comes back to our book. We're providing, a list of all these great arrangements, right? And as a director, the craft of directing is about the choices that we make. And those choices are really important. So what songs are we going to sing? I'll tell you that, like, I many times have been guilty in the past of thinking, oh, that's a really cool arrangement. We're just going to do that arrangement. And I pick the arrangement, and then I teach it, and then I try to audition the solo, and nobody can own the solo. And then I'm like, oh, whoops, we're in trouble now. Like, how are we really gonna pull this off? And we end up singing it, and it's okay, but no one really cares, even if the background parts are amazing and it's the coolest chart of all time. No one cares, because it doesn't seem organic, it doesn't seem honest, it doesn't seem natural. So we've been doing song pitches in my group, because that's the way that we decide what even songs we're going to do. Soloists have to pitch it much like you would, like on America's Got Talent or something, or The Voice or whatever. Like, here's a song with me as the soloist in this key and this style. And I've taught my students how the decision-making process works, all the different filters that I go through when choosing a solo and what sounds good. But I'm ultimately, when a song is right, when a song and soloist combination is right, you don't need to justify it. You will just know. And I'll tell you, I think we've chosen 5 of our songs so far for the year. And in all 5 of them, the soloist gets done pitching that song, and everyone looks around and everyone's just beaming ear to ear. And I'm like, well, so make those choices for your group that are going to fit your group's style, just as a whole, that are going to fit your soloists with their individual skills and strengths and range and style and flair and whatever else. And if you do those 2 things, the choices of those songs are going to then elevate whatever you do with the arranging, or whatever arrangement you pick out. Let's say you pick out Firework by Katy Perry. Well, then you got to find an arrangement. You got to arrange it yourself. So you go looking for that piece, and it's going to be that much more successful for you.
Yeah, absolutely true. And one thing I'll often suggest to a new group, high school, college, whatever, or young adults, professionals, whatever, is if they've got some free time, and obviously at this point, if it's safe with COVID, to go and do a karaoke night together, which is very similar to what JD's saying. Everybody go and pick a song for yourself and sing it, and particularly like on a Monday night when no one's there, so you can just take over the place. Or if you happen to live in a place like I do in San Francisco, where there are like all these really cool places where you can get your own private room, and then you just order up the sushi and take it over for 4 hours. Then after everybody sings a song that they want, everybody else picks a song for someone else, and then they sing it, which I found to be particularly insightful, because people are like, oh, I never realized I could do that, or that's an interesting choice. And then that starts to stretch your soloist as well, and shows a lot of respect and camaraderie within the group. Anyway,
I like that idea.
That's fun.
Cool. All right. The meat and potatoes of this book is the teaching guides. And one thing that drew me to it was taking my classical choral background and marrying it with contemporary a cappella, and getting all these people to write these style guides so they kind of guide you through it. Can you talk about sort of probably the biggest question: how do I not make my a cappella group sound choral? How do I make it sound like an a cappella group? What's the secret sauce to finding that link between choral and a cappella?
I actually don't think it's that hard. And I'd say the number one concern that I hear from different directors is, I have all this pedagogy. I learned how to properly teach choral music in the classical tradition. How am I supposed to do pop? And my answer is, you've been surrounded by popular music your entire life. Every time you turn on the television, it used to be every time you got in an elevator, but when you're walking through the grocery store and you hear it in between, every batter at a baseball game, et cetera, like, we are surrounded by popular music. That idiom is ours. So if you can take the techniques that you learned about the best way to run a rehearsal, the best way to keep your singers locked into tune, et cetera, but you use the flow and the stylings of popular music as you know them, you're going to have most of that taken care of. And then there are only a couple things that you need to deal with. Number one is the kind of slavish obsession with there being only correct, pure, tall vowels in classical music, which I understand the reason for them, and getting better overtones and being able to have everybody's lock their tuning right away. It's not always appropriate or correct in popular music, because a country music should be sung with a country twang if that's the original, right? And a folk music song might have a different kind of a sound to it, a lilt or whatever, if it's from Ireland, for example. And then there are other pop songs that have their own characteristic and their own phrasing, be it R&B or a song by a British invasion band or whatever. And you want to draw upon and sing in that style, so you don't end up like the King Singers Beatles album, where one of the soloists sings "Back in the USSR," which is lovely, but maybe not what your high schoolers really.
I like that King Singers arrangement. I don't know.
I love the album. Don't get me wrong, but I think for your singers, this is also, frankly, in many cases, and some of you may already know this, I call it the gateway drug, right? You get your singers, particularly getting guys into the program can be difficult. They hear this more popular music that they know, it draws them in the same way that you start reading get kids reading Harry Potter and Dr. Seuss, and then eventually they graduate up to Shakespeare because they understand and they are so much stronger at reading and they love reading. It's a great way to get them to love singing. That's one of the biggest reasons that I've chosen popular music as my life's work, to get more people singing. And one other thought I'll give you, and then I'll hand it over to JD. Often you'll have the melody in a section, right? You want to have your entire section sing the melody and have it sound like a pop song and not choral. Well, what happens in sheet music is everything gets squared off, right? It's all quarter notes and half notes and eighth notes and everything, look at a Stevie Wonder song, they can feel it all over, right? It's just so blocky. So what I recommend you do is have somebody in your choir who's got a great lead voice or whatever, and they know the original or whatever. They sing it with their diphthongs and their portamentos and their slides and the whole thing. And then you go, okay, great. I like it just like that. Maybe fix this little thing in the end. Perfect. Everybody else in the alto section, copy Marissa or whatever. And then they know how to do that because they've been doing it their whole lives. They do it at karaoke. They do it when they're all hanging out as a slumber party and something, whatever, and they're singing along with the radio. They know how to match that phrasing and tonality. And then the whole thing locks together and it's theirs, right? They own it. They feel a connection to it. So bottom line, it's much, much easier to do. And I think that every classical program should have a week where they make sure that people know that it's not something they should fear. JD?
Yeah, and I know a lot of groups, when they have reached out to me with like, how do I get started? I just want to like dip our foot in the water with my choral program. They know how to sing all this other music. How do we start getting interested in this? An easy way is something like what I call like crossover choral pop, like the King Singer stuff, or even a lot of Deke's charts and Rob Dietz's charts. Like they can be done really well with a large group, with a regular choir, and that gets them sort of interested in the style. Now, I sort of like break a cappella into two large, broad groups: contemporary a cappella, not vocal jazz or anything else, just contemporary a cappella. There's like the choral style where there's no vocal percussion and there's maybe some body percussion, a lot of syllabic stuff to create the rhythmic energy. And then like the soloists are soli sections and things like that. That's one side of it. Then the other side of it, where things have moved, the last 10 years especially, is the like vocal band style, right? Where you've got people emulating instruments and you've got like somebody doing the bass, right? And you got somebody doing the vocal percussion in some way. And there's probably one soloist instead of a whole group of soloists. And in that case, you can throw a lot of the rules about vowels and placement out of the window because you're trying to sound like something that's not a singer. And so authenticity is key. What sounds like it's supposed to. And like Deke said, the music, you can listen to the original song. And I know Deke would agree with me on this, but I encourage you, don't think of contemporary a cappella arrangements. If you buy one from somebody, me, Deke, Rob, one of these from the book.
Know where this is going, and I'm agreeing with you already. Go.
You can change it. It doesn't have to be, it's not set in stone. It's not like a Bach cantata where like scholars have studied it for centuries and this is the exact way that we need to sing this one part or whatever. No. It needs to be whatever makes it successful for your group, which is why so many groups end up arranging for themselves, right? It's because they know what fits their group the best, or they'll hire somebody to write for their group. But a lot of these stock charts that you will see, like Deke has probably at least 1,000. All these stock charts on Sheet Music Plus and Notefly, whatever else, you can take them and then, sorry, Deke, but he'll agree with me, you do whatever you want with them. Like add parts, take parts away. And also I would encourage you, choral directors, think of vocal parts, vocal divisions, tenor 1, alto 2, whatever, more as a spectrum and less as a delineation. People are like, well, how many of this part should I have? How many of this part, when you get started with a group, whoever wants to do it and sounds good, that's your voicing. And sometimes it's like one bass, one tenor, 4 altos and 2 sopranos. And that could be a really great a cappella group, right? You just have to voice for them. Something else to keep in mind, if you do want to sound like contemporary music, if you're going for that vocal band style, remember that pop music on the radio is very center heavy. And by center heavy, I mean like the center of the tonal spectrum, right? You get the low, woofy, whatever stuff, but a lot of the core of the harmonic sound is in the middle. It's warm. There's not a lot of stuff that's like violin ones that are pinching you in the, like grabbing your ear and poking you in the eyeball with like a laser. So when you voice your groups or when you're doing your arrangements and working on things, remember that you want the good stuff, the warm middle stuff, to carry a lot of the sonic palette. And you don't want to hear like some soprano on a high G singing like dong a dong a dong 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 over and over again. Those are a few other little different things that you can do that are a little bit different than the traditional group. Go ahead, Deke.
I was gonna say, Deke, you had a video you released recently where you said, change my arrangement.
Please. Yeah, I have a whole YouTube channel called, and a little like series called Too Many Notes. And I think the most recent one was literally, please change my arrangements. Not just you may, but an arrangement, it's a roadmap. It's a series of decisions to help get you to a place to connect your singers to an audience. It's not music in and of itself. And I think you can, you can take any piece of music. I would actually even make an argument that you could take a Bach motet, and if you needed to make a couple changes to it to make your group work better, I don't think Bach's like feelings will be hurt. He's going to be okay. You're working with students. Maybe they don't have the low E, so you have to pop it up an octave or whatever. But bottom line, do whatever is going to sound good with your students. And sometimes giving them a little bit of license and having them change the vowel or do something different gives them this real sense of ownership, and they're even more excited about singing this piece of music. It's a big piece of it all. And to JD's most recent point, when you're looking at the sound of contemporary a cappella, a big piece of it is really taken from the sound of popular music. And it's the extremely rare pop singer who sings in her head voice, if you're talking about female voices. So high breaks and singing up to the top of their chest voice is common with a lot of power up there. And you do have guys in falsetto often, but you end up having this kind of a ceiling, and you almost never have anybody up in ledger lines in the treble clef in women's voices, just because it becomes sounding classical or kind of choral in its approach, not popular. But if you've got guys up there, you know, in the stratosphere with falsetto, you know, Frankie Valli and the Bee Gees, et cetera, all of that is kind of fair game. So I think that's really what RG, you know, what JD was going for. And then what I would add as one last little thing is, when you're looking at the overall sonorities of a lot of contemporary a cappella arranging, particularly the stuff that I think is really successful, it's really spaced to mimic the harmonic series, for those of you who have enough physics to really know what I'm talking about, the overtone series. So your bass is down low, and then your upper voices are kind of locked in up here, you know, so there's an octave or an octave and a fifth before you get your tenor, and then these three are kind of close voiced. And that locks tuning really well. And a lot of what you're going to find from pentatonics through other groups is a super low bass down there, often mic'd, because that's the only way you can really have those notes resonate. If you've got one on a part, if you've got a larger section, I got secrets. You can ask questions later if you like. How do I do it on Carnegie Hall stage with, you know, 250 or 500 people? But then with the upper voices, keep them kind of close and don't put your women up too high. And that'll give you a really authentic popular music sound.
Piggybacking off of that, two things. One, we have actually a great chapter in the book written by Dr. Erin Hackle, who has this wonderful singing method for, you know, singing this popular music. JD, you've worked with Dr. Hackle before. You want to just talk about her a little bit, or?
Sure. I think it's one of the most valuable chapters in the book beyond the teaching guides themselves. And, you know, she's a classical singer by trade, and she was doing contemporary music with her kids. And she was like, wait a minute, there are no methods to teaching this. Nobody has any techniques, and anybody that tells you what you're doing, that, you know, they'll tell you it's wrong. Like if it's not bel canto singing, like, oh, it's incorrect, it's unhealthy. And she sort of just like, she was like, well, that can't be true. Like, that's just one way of singing. You know, you look around the world and everyone sings completely differently. And so she started this method called spectrum singing, and it truly is an exploration of all of the tonal possibilities of the human voice, and how you can develop your singer's palettes to be able to explore all of those tonal areas. I know I use a lot of her exercises with my traditional choral groups too, because it helps them to explore all of their resonating cavities. And then occasionally, like, we're singing a Bulgarian piece and I want them to be really nasal, and they can do it. You know, they don't have to suddenly go, well, we don't know how to sing that way because we only know how to sing, you know, really tall with warm sound. So anyways, you know, that is really helpful with Erin's book. If you have a chance to just check out Spectrum Singing, she's got a series on YouTube, and it's really, really awesome. But she goes through in the chapter of this book and outlines all of the basically pharyngeal position changes that you can make, and in basically these positions that she's created. And I will tell you right now, it is one of the most successful things that I've implemented with both my choral groups and my contemporary groups, and it has been a game changer. So I cannot recommend it enough. Erin Hackle's Spectrum Singing, it's very, very valuable.
Yeah.
I noticed, Mark, we got a question in the Q&A. Should we?
Yeah, let's go for it.
I've been there. I'd love to answer this one because it's near and dear to my heart. So the question is, how do I balance the emotional part of rehearsal and the technical part? How can I blend them together? One group struggles with forgetting about one or the other. Okay, here's my recommendation for the technique. And like I mentioned, it's all in the book, The Heart of Vocal Harmony. Bottom line, if the whole point of a piece of music is emotional transference, if you want to get the audience to feel something, then there needs to be some kind of an overarching thesis to your piece of music. Why are you singing this piece of music? What's the feeling? What's the mood? What's the message? And then, of course, there are songs that are like one mood all the way through, like Oh, What a Beautiful Morning. It's always a beautiful morning. It starts out a beautiful morning. It ends a beautiful morning. So you really have like kind of one mood, one feeling you're trying to transfer there. And then there are also songs that are stories and they go from one place to another, both great and valid and whatever. But you want to understand a song, you want to know what the history of it is and what the context is and how you're going to approach it with your singers and, you know, is like what's their particular take on it going to be. And then make all of your choices creatively and artistically within the technical aspects of the music based on that. So your dynamics, and maybe some of your stops, so like what's the tempo you're going to be using and what do the vowel sounds like. If it's a happy song, be nice and bright and et cetera, et cetera. And once you've locked in the kind of overarching thesis of what the song's going to be, then you can get into the nuts and bolts of it. And JD is a great proponent of making sure that, and this is one of my mottos too, make sure that people only do the things together that require all of them to be together. Meaning, as much as you can, have people work on their own music parts on their own, learn their notes on their own. And if you give them the right materials and they've got learning recordings or whatever, then they can go home and work on it, because some people are super fast and some people take a long time. Then when they all come back together, you can really craft and polish the sound. And it's such a much more enjoyable experience for everyone because everyone's on the same page. Some people don't feel slow. Some people aren't bored while the altos are learning the difficult notes because the sopranos have the melody again, blah, 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 right? So once you've got that going, then when you're in the throes of teaching the piece of music, make sure to put the responsibility for the emotion on your singers, and they always sing with the emotion. Now, if you're singing, you're fixing 3 notes, you're fixing the vowels in one measure. Obviously, you don't have to like, okay, let's get in character, let's get in the mood, but never say, let's just sing it again. Let's just take it from the top. No. If you're going to sing the piece of music, the emotion has to be there from the beginning and always. Otherwise, you're going to be exercising this muscle, the notes. And you get out on stage, you're going to try to sing it with emotion, and this muscle's atrophied. It doesn't work. Or you'll find yourself stumbling upon it. Like one Tuesday rehearsal's amazing, and then the next Tuesday, you're like, where did that emotional energy go? It's because you stumbled upon it. Somebody said something, or there was something, blah, blah, blah. And about saying things, by the way, I could talk about this all day. I'll wrap it up now. But one thing that you can do also is to have a discussion, like JD said, about the song and what it means. And sometimes it won't be your words, but it'll be one of your singers saying something about what it means or something happened in their life that really coalesces the meaning of that song for them. And before starting a piece of music, and when recording it in the studio sometimes, or if I'm up on stage, wherever, I might whisper that short little phrase. I might say those couple words as people are getting their pitch, just to remind them of that discussion, of that moment or whatever. And that helps them tap into the emotion and the sense memories that they have of what the song means. And we can go on and on and on about all the different process that's drawn from Stanislavski and acting and sense memories, blah, blah, blah. But bottom line, those are some of the pieces there. Keep the emotion as the driving force for the technical choices that you make throughout. And I think you'll find it all to be much more successful, and they won't forget.
Right. I was just going to add, I think I got this from you, Deke. You'll learn much more through performance than you will rehearsal. So try to perform as often as possible.
Yes.
Because rehearsals are work, and nobody really wants to do that. You want to perform, so you'll learn so much more throwing yourself in the deep end than you will, going through it again and again with no audience. I think.
I agree, and I think a lot of choral programs have like 3 concerts a year or something, and I urge them to get out and sing in front of the student body, go sing in a nursing home, go sing in a middle school, get out there and sing on the street corner, farmer's market, doesn't matter, because they'll learn how to draw a crowd. They'll learn that, like, how to connect with an audience. And they'll also remember that it's not about the notes and rhythms. It's about that transference, that connection with the audience. So then that matters much for them. And a lot of directors also say, like, well, like, nobody cares. And then all of a sudden the week before the rehearsal or before the concert, they just like get so like, oh, there's all this work to do. If you've got a lot of small performances and we're singing this song at the all school assembly, and then next week we've got this, you're spreading out when those songs need to be done. And it's almost like having little quizzes throughout the course of your school year. And then they're so much better at them, and they're doing it because there's a reason, as opposed to like, oh, everything's shoved to the end of the semester and we just have one big exam.
Right. Oh, hi, Alec.
Oh, hey, I'm back. So I do have a question. I've been listening all along, and again, just thank you so much for doing this and for giving your insights. Really great. I have a question about here we are in this pandemic world, and I've heard anecdotally that a lot of choirs are having trouble. Sorry about my dog. About recruiting, about having trouble recruiting folks into our choral, our a cappella contemporary programs in this moment. What advice do you have, and what can we do to bring people into our programs?
JD.
Look, this is where contemporary music is the answer. It's not part of the answer, it's the answer. The material in contemporary music is culturally native to the audiences, right? We started One Voice, and I think I had like 70 kids in the choir. And then 3 years later, there were 300 kids in the choir. They weren't all in One Voice. There were 12 of them in One Voice, right? But the audiences heard that. And then like we started doing pops concerts, where like at the very end of the year, we had musical dessert and our choirs all sang popular music. Now, of course, the first thing parents said, and this should cue you into something, they were like, well, we should make every concert a pops concert. And I'm like, no. You don't just get to eat ice cream for 4 meals a day. But that tells you that this is an opportunity to use contemporary music. Use it in your regular concerts too. Like we're going to do some fun music with our traditional groups in our fall concert, just because we need ways to connect to the audience. There might be some singers out there that aren't with you, but they just go to the school, or they might go to the school down the street, or they might go to the middle school or whatever. And you capture them because, it wasn't the handle, that got them. It was the, whatever contemporary piece that they know and they were like singing along with, and it grabbed their heartstrings. This is our opportunity. And so I encourage you to use popular music in whatever ways it can be helpful as a culturally native connective tool to both your students and to your audience. Right now, people need each other, I think, more than ever. I mean, Deke and I have talked about this a bunch over the course of the pandemic. The virtual stuff is great as a placeholder, but it doesn't replace human, face-to-face music making and sharing. And so even if it's with masks on, even if it's outside, even if it's like, 40 feet apart or whatever it is that we have to do to make that happen, I would encourage you to use this culturally native music and sing to as many people as you possibly can. I mean, like Deke said earlier, I mean, we go all over the school. They won't let us a lot of times because we're like having to like limit high risk contacts and all this stuff. I mean, stuff we never thought we'd be talking about even 2 years ago, right? But even then, I'm still asking questions. I'm like, well, can we all go outside? Can we sing outside and we use microphones? Like, can we find ways to engage people who might want to sing for us? And then that's when that heart part comes back again, that emotion part. If they see you singing and there's joy, there's genuine, joy and genuine emotion from your group, people are going to feel that and they're going to want to be a part of it. They're going to say, I've never sung before in a choir, or I've never been in an a cappella group, but man, that looks awesome. I want to be a part of that. And that's ultimately where the magic happens, is when you can do that. So
agreed. I would say as much as you can come up with creative ways to make music. Maybe maybe you end up coming up with a song and you change the lyrics to being about how much you hate wearing masks, and then it's fun and you can do it in assembly. And like JD said, anywhere you can, as much as possible. And the Zoom choir videos are tired and we're all exhausted doing them and it's a lot of work, but it's also something you can do. So you have to shift your expectations around that, but just make sure that you're creating and you're finding different ways that people can create and just keep doing it. And this too shall pass.
It was a few months ago where I did a presentation at College Music Society. There's so much technology we don't even realize how much there is that we can use to collaborate. Just very quickly, you could use BandLab, which is an online DAW, which allows it updates in real time. You could also collaborate by arranging. You could all arrange together. There's this great program called flat.io, where I kind of demonstrate a trick where if you create a dummy email and everybody signs into that same email, you can all arrange together in real time. So there's all different kinds of projects that you can do, especially during the pandemic. You just got to make stuff.
Make stuff.
Just make something. Stop using excuses. Okay, you're sitting there. All right, make something.
And you can also, there's like the acapella app and other little apps.
Right.
You can have all of your singers create a little 4-part harmony thing for themselves. It could be 10 seconds long. It could be a little jingle, or a cute little like happy birthday shout out to somebody or whatever. And there are a lot of ways that we're just so used to, like, everybody needs to be in the room together and then they're going to sing this 4-part harmony and that's the right way to do it or whatnot. But there are a lot of ways that people can make music with technology, or they record a part and they come up with something and then they send it to someone else and they add a part and then they send it to someone else and they add another part. There are ways to be fun and silly and create cool stuff.
There's a question on the Q&A. Do you want me to, Alec, were you going to say something? Or
same question.
How has social distancing helped your singers' blend and listening skills?
Ooh, I'll take that, because that's what I've been doing for 18 months. We're currently, this might sound familiar, I'm just happy that we're singing, honestly, and in person. But we're singing distance masked in an auditorium. I'm on the stage like 30 feet away from them with a microphone on. And we've been doing this kind of thing for a long time. And it is so hard to get younger singers, especially our less experienced singers, to sing out, right? Because they don't have any feedback. They can't hear other people as well. They're afraid because their voice is going to go all over the place. They're afraid to sing out. One of the things that I do, and this isn't the exact question, but this is going to get to it, is I make every day during warm-ups, there's some part of my warm-up process where I'll make silly sounds, and I'll pick on a few people to make some silly sound that everybody has to repeat. And I'll start with the people who are really confident, who've been around for a long time at first. And then I'll slowly start to pick on the new folks once they realize it's like not a big deal to make sound. And then they're like, oh, maybe it's not a big deal to like sing in my head voice. Maybe it's not a big deal to sing this weird vowel in German, whatever. So getting them really comfortable in a spaced out environment, I think, is really, really important. I've got my biggest group right now, and they are a lot of young, 9th graders, first year with me in choir, and yet they're spread out all over the auditorium. And so, I'm trying to break down those barriers of fear that we talked about earlier so they feel comfortable singing out. Now, once that has happened, I have discovered that, like my last year's choirs, they became really good. They had to listen so hard to make anything sound good, that, they sang really well. Their vowels were really locked, and things were really in tune, and they were blending and balancing and all of the things that we want to happen. So yes, I have seen, I guess, sort of an ancillary benefit through this from COVID, but I think the biggest thing that's holding everybody back from that, when I talked to a lot of my colleagues, was that first part. It's not so much even getting to the ability to be able to think about blend or balance. It's that so many younger singers are scared because these masks and the distance that we're having to deal with right now are just really big barriers for them to express themselves openly. And so I would encourage you to use all the tools that you possibly can. Feel free to reach out to me anytime. I've got a million other ideas about how I have done that. But to me, that is the key. That is the key to making this distance and mask stuff work really well, is getting them comfortable.
Great.
Great. So
Okay,
I don't know,
there it is.
Mark, if you have any other questions, but I really appreciate everyone's time on the call, and tell your friends to check out the YouTube posting of this webinar. And thank you all so much for this amazing book, Teaching Music with Performance in Contemporary A Cappella, a fantastic contribution to the profession and to contemporary a cappella directors, choir directors everywhere, and look forward to continuing to get the word out about it. And again, wish all of you a wonderful day, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Alec. Thank you, everybody. Good to see you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks.